Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the City Council meeting on January the 26th here for the City of Weatherford. Before we call our meeting to order, I'm going to ask David Slider to come up from Grace First Presbyterian Church. KC Chiefs, mask and all, sir. Would you lead us in the invocation?
Yes, sir.
As you said, you earned the right to wear that for many years, right?
I grew up there, so let us pray. God of creation, we thank you for sun, how it warms your earth and how it warms our souls. Lord, we just ask that you would continue to bless each and every one of us every day of our lives as we continue to seek after you. Lord, we ask for wisdom and guidance, not only for these group of people tonight, but for our country, that we can continue to move forward and always honoring and praising you in the things that we do. Lord, we just ask for blessings upon this meeting tonight. We pray these things in Christ's name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you for being here again, sir. Item 2 on the agenda is call the meeting to order at 6:30 p.m. We do have a full council present this evening. Item 3 is pledges of allegiance to the United States and Texas flags. Both will be led this evening by Councilman Robinson.
If you would please stand and join me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state under God, one indivisible.
Thank you for that, sir. Item 4 on the agenda is items of community interest. Mr. Hotop.
I do have one. So actually happened on Friday. Governor Abbott released 1 million rapid tests that he was going to make available to small businesses. And so through the course of basically one business day, our chamber was able to be one of the first 5 chambers across the state of Texas to go out and get certified for that, and we'll be able to distribute those to frontline workers, to businesses not only in Weatherford but in all of Parker County to do rapid tests for COVID exposure. So really cool thing, really credit the chamber with being on the ball, being able to get out in front of that and be not only one of the first ones in the state, but definitely the first one in Parker County for that. So really good.
Great job, Weatherford Chamber of Commerce. Council, any items of community interest? Anybody? All righty, we'll go to item 5, which is presentations and proclamations. 5A is strong community employee highlight video. Blake Rexroth.
Mayor, members of council, Blake Rexroth, Director of Communications and Marketing, and I come before you once again for, I've lost count, 7th, 8th employee highlight video. So tonight we are presenting you with another employee highlight video, which includes Tiffany Bagwell, our court administrator, and she's here with us tonight in the back. I think she's with her husband.
Welcome, Tiffany.
So I'll show the video for you now.
My name is Tiffany Bagwell, and I'm the court administrator for the Weatherford Municipal Court. I've been with the city for 6 years. My job at the city entails processing Class C misdemeanor tickets that are issued by the Weatherford Police Department. We help defendants take care of their tickets at the window. We schedule trial dockets, pretrial hearing dockets for them. We process payments at the window. We issue warrants, just customer service for anyone who has a ticket issued by the Weatherford Police Department. I'm from Weatherford. My parents moved to this area when I was 2, so I was raised here. I went to school here. My husband is from Aledo, so he's local too, and we've been married 22 years. We have 2 children, a daughter who is 20, and a student at Texas Tech, and a son who is 17 and will be a senior at Weatherford High School next year. A lot of times when people get a ticket, maybe it's their first ticket, they don't know what to do, they don't know what to expect, and they'll come into the court, we'll help them or we'll help them during a pretrial hearing. And I hear more oftentimes than I can count, people will say, I was so afraid to come in, I was afraid you were gonna take me to jail, I didn't know what to expect, but it wasn't bad. You guys were so nice to me. The judge was so kind to me and so respectful, and I feel so much better now about the court process because of how I was treated here. That's really rewarding, and I hear that all the time from people.
That's great.
I tell you, it makes me want to run out and go get a ticket right now.
We didn't know that Tiffany has the opera talent. I'll tell you what,
Yeah.
we all prefer to walk past that municipal court window versus have to turn
Absolutely.
and
Yeah.
stop and do business, right?
Well, we'll have another video for you all next month. I think that's our last one. And I just want to make a quick comment because she's here tonight. Nicole Wright is in the gallery here tonight, and she's the one behind all of these videos. She's basically our videographer on top of other things. So tell her kudos after the meeting if you can. Thank you.
Do. And Tiffany, thank you to you and all your coworkers in municipal court. Okay, council item 6 is consent agenda items. I felt like I need to sing that after Tiffany did. We have 6A through 6F. Do we need to pull any of those out individually, or can we entertain those as a body? Seeing none, well, looks like Councilman Robinson has placed a motion for approval of the body. Kevin Cleveland has seconded that. Any discussion before we call for a vote? 6A through 6F, calling for a vote at this time. Please indicate yea or nay. Passes 5-0. Item 7 on the agenda is public hearings. 7A, hold a public hearing, consider adoption of ordinance O2021-03, amending Title 12 zoning ordinance for the city of Weatherford, MCA 2020-0010. Good evening, sir.
Mayor and council, you have in your packets today the full staff report, and as this is a general update, as we had discussed when we made the original amendments in August of 2020 to the Weatherford zoning regulations, you asked staff to come back and look at it and make sure we needed to make any updates, and so that's what we've done at this time, and you have that in your packets. Some of the major changes, and because it's such a large document, we have the outline that was given to you to help break it down, and then you could find those a little quicker. But the major changes that are included in this is we've added a commercial development process chart. This is something that's we have heard from several developers, and to help in our efforts to continue to build a strong community and help build the process so everyone can fully understand it and they can have the process in front of them. And so we added that to the ordinance based on the ordinances that are there. We also updated the nonconformities chapter in the zoning regulations. That was one of the sections that we really didn't touch on too much in our first draft of this, and we came back to it after we got all of the other changes done. And so that was one of the major changes. We updated the garage drawings because we did include some drawings in our first draft, but a lot of people were going and drawing exactly what we put on there, and that wasn't the point of those drawings. We wanted to show them the array of different things that they could do, and so we updated those, and so it would help them be a little bit more clear on what we were expecting or wanting to see in those developments when they come up on the homes and the layouts. It also updated the sign code in regards to seasonal sign. There was an amendment also to the parking stall requirements. There was some discrepancy that was in there, and so we clarified those parking requirements and stall requirements. And we also clarified the food truck standards, which was also a priority. And we just, at your recent actions, updated the food establishment regulations. So we wanted to make sure both of those ordinances worked together and there wasn't differences there to cause any confusion. Those were the major changes that were in these zoning updates. At the January 13th Planning and Zoning Commission meeting, it was voted 7-0 unanimously of all those present to approve with the following condition, which was the removal of the supplemental conditional use standards in regards to automobile washes, mini storage warehouses, and hotel and motels. That section, the Planning Commission, there was a lot of discussion in regards to those supplemental changes. Subsequently, after the end of that discussion, the Planning Commission did ask about the possibility of having a joint meeting to discuss some of these things. Staff reiterated what our understanding was from the joint meetings that we had had prior. And so those were some of the major concerns as we went through those supplemental changes and their request to remove those. One of the things that comes up, and the reason behind staff's recommendation that there, just to help everyone understand on that, was automobile, car washes, mini warehouse storage, and hotel motels are conditional uses with this amendment. And we wanted to make it clearer when staff meets with developers and those interested parties, so that they have a clear idea what the expectations are when we come with them. And instead of having to come to a meeting and at that meeting with the Planning Commission, receive all of the conditions that the Planning Commission. So this was just a way to help expedite and be upfront with developers in that process. And so that's the outline that you have before you, and what's before you is an ordinance to adopt these zoning regulations with these changes as recommended by the Planning Commission. And so if you have any questions, I'd be glad to answer any, or I can answer those after the hearing.
Council, we need to have a public hearing. Would y'all mind if we have that first, and then if there's any public input, we can take that into account with our questions? Okay. Stick around, Mr. Kettner. Don't go too far, sir. We'll have a public hearing on item 7A at this time. Is there anybody from the floor that'd like to come forward and speak specifically on this item? Hearing none, we will close the public hearing on item 7A, sir. If you come on back up. Council, discussion, questions, feedback. Mayor Pro Tem?
I do have several questions for you. And I listened to the planning and zoning meeting, and I understand it, correct me where I'm wrong. I understand that the secondary items were there for transparency's sake.
Yes.
In other words, to help the public know exactly what the expectations were. Am I correct in that statement?
Yes.
Given that I'm correct in that statement, I could not tell what the problem was with leaving that to make that more clear and transparent to the people that need to be coming before us.
And it would be my understanding, based on the hearing and what had occurred on that, some of the concerns was in regards to the mile radius requirements, whether that was appropriate, the exact number that should be. No one suggested any modifications to those, but those were just the percentages and the distance separations were some of the major concerns that appeared to be one of the concerns, but no discussion was had as far as possibly modifying that to some other distance. There was a lot of discussion about that topic, though.
That's a great question. Your others?
I'm concerned when I listen to it to just eliminate that in its entirety does not give a clear and transparent process to the person coming before us. And I think that we should add that back in. If there wants to be a discussion with regard to the distance or whatever it is, maybe that can be a future discussion and change. But I believe we need to add that back in.
Well stated. Any other questions or comments? Ms. Wilder? Mayor Pro Tem, any other questions?
No, sir.
Who's next?
I'm good.
I agree with adding it back in. I think you're absolutely right. The problem we've seen is we've had customers that come into the city. They pick up a piece of property with an intended use, thinking they're going to be able to put item X in it. They spend engineering money. They spend time and effort coming before us, fingers crossed, hoping they can get it by, and it's subject to opinions, versus giving them something clear and concise that says, I check all the boxes. I can invest my money, and I know I've got a safe investment. I agree with that. I'd be hesitant in putting it into play as is without having a discussion about the distances and stuff, because you're setting the standard at a, in my opinion, at a little bit of a high, radius immediately. And then we would instantly go back into a debate on that and changing it again. I personally would like to have a little bit of a discussion about the radius maybe now, or possibly just lowering it down now and seeing the effects of that.
I don't know why we wouldn't have the discussion now. That's what we're here to do, and do it in public. I do have just a general question. I mean, because we do need to save the time of the applicants. We need to save the time of staff if we feel like it's not a fit for our community. You know, car washes, long-term, after they've gone past their use, there's so much plumbing and things that are installed, they're hard to repurpose into something else. And the same thing for mini storage and the other things that we're talking about. And we see those going everywhere. And saying that, my question is this: do you see a high volume of calls? I mean, is this something where you're getting a lot of interest and it's taking up a lot of staff's time?
We do. A matter of fact, as far as our volumes of the request, we receive between 3 to 4 calls weekly requesting about where, how they can install a car wash. And this is each. This isn't just car washes. Auto uses and repair, storage units, and RV parks are our highest volume. We get 3 to 4 calls each every single week on those, as far as individuals looking and inquiring about these types of uses. And so yeah, our volume is very high, and anything that we can do to, since a lot of these would be conditional use permits, would be to make sure that's clear to them what the expectations are. So.
Council, do y'all want to talk geography? Is there any more general questions before we talk distance?
Did we see the supplemental conditional use standards? Was that in our packet?
Yes, that's it.
Where was it at? Because obviously I missed it.
You should have seen that as the attachment for the zoning ORST list, effective changes on the attachment.
Oh.
Okay, and then,
12302, Matt.
Say that again?
12302.
yeah.
Mr. Kittner, can you run through the amendments that y'all proposed originally to planning and zoning?
Yes.
Including the ones that were removed by them, just so we look at what the total amendments were.
Yes, it was.
And I apologize if I'm putting you on the spot. I just want to make sure we look at it as a body.
Okay. So in each of the zoning districts, each of the zoning districts, in the commercial zoning districts, the C1, C2, C3 districts are all, you'll see that that's repetitive because it's, each one of those districts would allow them as a conditional use permit. And so to be even across the board, what our expectations would be for the supplemental conditional use standards for an automobile wash. And we'll start with that one, and maybe then we can just move on from there.
Okay.
The automobile wash was, shall not be authorized within a 2-mile radius of a pre-existing automobile wash. And item 2 is an automatic or drive-through car wash must be accompanied with a gas station or convenience store. And the third would be a self-service or pull bay car wash must have a minimum of 6 bays. Those were the supplemental conditions, so we could be upfront as far as what our expectations are. Now, if that mile radius, that leaves a lot of areas. If you think about the radius, we looked at the radiuses to ensure that there are still plenty of places available that a car wash could go or could be located at. It just wouldn't compact them all, for example, on Main Street in some of those areas. So this would help separate them. Now, whether 2 miles is what's best, or if maybe it's a 1-mile radius to start with, and then we discuss it further from there. But that was what staff looked at as a plausible first shot at the distance separations. So.
Okay.
So did that take into account where car washes were already located and then mapping it availability? And that's how you determine the 2 miles?
Yes, that's what we did. We looked at where the existing car washes were and then where they could go from that point. Yes.
Okay. Thank you for clarifying.
My thoughts are not probably as scientific as y'all's, but I just basically started at the courthouse and drove different directions for about a mile, 2 miles, 3 miles, and looked at what I passed as I went, and kind of looked at the, most of these are service related, with the exception of hotel, your mini self-storage are directly tied to apartments, houses in the community that needs them. And to me, 3 miles covered a lot of ground, and so I felt like that was pretty far out there, as is the 2 mile for a car wash. I would be comfortable with 1 mile on the car wash, for sure. And at a minimum, I would say reduce the mini storage to 2 miles. I don't know what y'all's thoughts on that are. That could possibly be a mile, in my opinion. If you start getting a buildup of apartments, that space might need to be smaller, but currently we don't have a whole lot of apartments.
So your statement for consideration, not formal yet, but is 1 mile for automatic washes. And then for mini storage and warehouses, what was that?
At least down to 2, but I mean, if you guys, I'd like to hear y'all's opinion on 1 versus 2 miles on that one.
And where are you on hotel motel?
Hotel motel, I'm completely fine with the hotel motel as it's put in here previously from staff. They don't have a mile limit or anything on those, just the story and height. And I did have a question for Caleb though on the automobile wash. I understand the idea, and Paul, you hit it right on the head with the radius. These buildings are great services when they're new and they're put in, but when the business no longer exists, that property becomes very difficult to do anything with, because it's so specific, which is why we have conditional use permit. But having said that, so that makes sense for the radius, but the automatic or drive-through car wash being accompanied by a gas station, could you walk me through the thought process behind that item?
One of the thought processes on that is what exactly of the car washes that we're seeing that come in, that we have a mix of those between the different types of car washes, because it seems like some of the most popular ones are, the newer ones are, you don't see a lot of the self-service anymore, nearly as much. We do see a lot of the automobile, the item 2, the automobile drive-through car wash is pretty common with most convenience stores. A lot of times they come in with those. And the self-service bays are probably the least common, but those are just what our thoughts were based on our discussions regarding auto uses and previous conditional use permits that have been issued regarding car washes in the community. So we just used the previous conditional use permits just as a guide. So item 2 and 3 really could be, I mean, really, if you're controlling it by the radiuses, how close, then at that point, the question is does the type really matter at that point?
And that's the reason I ask is I can see, if you force it to be tied to a gas station, you give it some other purpose when it goes down the line and it changes its viability, per se. It gives it another potential use because the car wash,
Yes.
gas station's attached. So I was thinking of it that way, but I also see that there seems to be a divide in the way car washes are going. You're seeing a lot of freestanding car washes whose sole purpose is car washes, and they're turning in some pretty nice facilities. And so I just would hate to sell ourselves short to where we end up with smaller, probably not as quality car washes just because we attach them to a gas station, just because, that's all you can get on the property. I think we could cause ourselves to have less quality car washes that come by attaching them to gas stations. I personally think the number 2, I would rather see item 2, that says an automatic or drive-through car wash must be accompanied with a gas station or convenience store. I think I'd rather see that one get marked off.
Okay, duly noted. Any other questions or comments?
Kevin, would you be opposed to making both of those 2 mile radiuses?
I'm not opposed to any conversation at all about it, but I think 1 mile, personally, I think 1 mile is better on the automobile wash. I'm not opposed to having to talk about 2 miles.
Keep in mind, this is something that we can look at if it's not accomplishing the goals that we feel like as a body or the planning and zoning feels like, we can amend that radius at a future date too. So this isn't a decision that we're stuck with forever. tonight.
Understood. I was just, my thought process is, and I've already asked this question, but
Sure.
my thought process is, staff went through a lot of, a lot of effort in really putting this together and noting what was already in our city. And then seeing what was available, that would accommodate this. And I really feel like the 2-mile radius is a very,
We can consider as a compromise, if it's something that everybody could agree to, we could consider a 1.5-mile radius. We don't have to use a 1 or a 3 or a 2. So y'all talk that out, let's figure out what the best solution is and
just thought maybe if it was 2-mile, it's easy to, but if both are 2-mile, it's easy
sure.
to,
Okay.
you know,
Well said, it's an action item, we need to have our discussion about that radius or move forward with a decision.
I think one thing that's important to note is the conditional use permit, trying to be as transparent as possible in giving a radius and being able to, even if you removed item 2 and 3 off that and just left the radius, the conditional use items would still be applicable to that car wash when they come forward for that conditional use.
Okay.
So,
Further discussion, 7A.
I'd like to make a motion that we approve, let me get to the right page, bear with me.
Take your time, there's a lot to this.
Yeah. That we adopt the ordinance 02-02103 as presented by staff to include the items, let me get back over to that one. In section 12.3.302, they were in the original proposal before planning and zoning, to include, all except for items, 3A, 2, and 3 would like to be striked, and leave or, amend item 1 to a 1-mile radius, and then amend item B1 to a 2-mile radius.
There's a motion on the floor, do we feel like we've got that?
and just a point of clarification, that would be to all 3 sections being the same, 12.3.302, 12.3.303, and 12.3.304.
Correct.
Yes, okay.
okay, wait a second. You just lost me there.
Trust me, Heidi.
So all,
Your famous last word.
I want to see the motion on, can you show us what that is?
if you look at the 3 sections, there are 3 sections, all 3 of the commercial districts were making the requested amendment to apply to all 3.
Right.
Okay, so does that leave at least the 2-mile on the warehouse?
Many
Or
words correct.
Yes,
you're only wanting the one,
A car wash, yes.
yes, it adds back, if you'd like, I could just read it to,
That'd be great, and then let's make sure Ms. Knoll is okay on it, so it's properly described in the,
okay?
go ahead, nice and slow.
All right, this will add back in regards to sections 12.3.302, 12.3.303, and 12.3.304, items Roman numeral 1, which is adding a reference note to section 5.3 to automobile wash, hotel motel, mini warehouse, self-storage, conditional uses in zoning district use charts for supplemental conditions. Roman numeral 2 added below to the design standards, which is 3 supplemental condition use standards. A, automobile wash. 1 shall be authorized within 1 mile radius of a pre-existing automobile wash. B, mini warehouse self-storage. Item 1 shall not be authorized within a 2-mile radius of a pre-existing mini warehouse self-storage facility. Item 2, 60% of the units must be temperature controlled with air conditioning and heating. Item 3 shall have a minimum lot size of 2 acres. Item C, hotel motels, One is all rooms shall have internal entry only, no individual outside entry into rooms. And item 2 shall be a minimum of 2 stories in height.
I thought my confusion was much clearer.
Mayor Pro Tem, does that help at all?
It does. Just want to make one comment to Kevin. We can always reduce it, but it's hard to go forward and back up what you've applied.
There's a motion, and we can come back for discussion, Mayor Pro Tem. There's a motion on the floor. Is there a second? As presented by Councilman Cleveland. Second by Matt Tiskus. Now let's discuss the item. Mayor Pro Tem.
Just wanted to say,
Fair enough.
your comment is, we can come back and see how this works and discuss it. I would only caution you that it's easier to go down than it is to go up.
So you're suggesting 2 for the car wash?
I really am. I think staff did a phenomenal job of planning and mapping that out, and I commend them for the work that they did. So I really believe 2 miles is appropriate.
Duly noted. There is a motion and a second presented at 1. Is there any other comments or questions before we call for a vote on the item? 7A, let's take a vote. Oh, yes, sir. Mr. Robinson, I'm sorry, I'm going too fast.
I was just gonna say that I appreciate Kevin's motion, but staff has worked hard, put a lot of time and thought into this, as I'm sure Kevin has as well. But I think Heidi makes an excellent point, that it's easier to change, to reduce than it is to expand later.
And I think that's what we're here to do, is talk about things, and that's what we're doing effectively. And so we can take a vote on the item, and if we don't pass the item, we can come back and revisit through another motion. Y'all ready, prepared to do that, council? Okay, we'll take a vote on 7A. Indicate yea or nay at this time. Okay, 7A passes 3-2. 7B is hold a public hearing and consider adoption of ordinance 020. Excuse me? Mr. Zellers, did I make an error, sir?
The P&Z, once they make this recommendation to overrule what they did, you've got to have a 3/4 vote.
Okay.
So that motion.
It's never easy when you come to the front. So, okay, so your statement is that did not pass because a 3/4 vote was.
That's correct. You got to have 4 out of 5.
Okay, so 7A, I stand corrected on the record. It did not pass.
You can entertain another motion.
Okay, great. So we're going to stay on item 7A. Council, is there further discussion, or we'd like to consider another motion?
Did it pass without the supplemental items, though?
No.
Because it had passed 7-0 without the supplemental, right?
Our motion on the floor had failed, so we're back.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right.
Okay.
I'd be
Alrighty.
willing to make a motion that we,
I'm going to make a
Mayor
motion,
Pro Tem's hit the button.
the same as Kevin's motion, except it's going to be 2-mile radius for the car washes.
And there's a second by Jeff Robinson. Any discussion on this? Okay, hearing none, we'll call for a vote this time. 7A. City Secretary's loving this, huh? Indicate yea or nay, please, on 7A. That is a 5-0 vote, so 7A passes as presented by the Mayor Pro Tem. Mr. Kettner, does anybody need clarification on that, or are we okay? We just changed one radius from 1 mile to 2 in one specific area, correct, Mayor Pro Tem?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Everybody ready to move on? Okay, don't go far, you're still up. 7B, hold a public hearing and consider adoption of ordinance 02021-04, amending Title 11 subdivision regulations for the city of Weatherford and its extraterritorial jurisdiction, ETJ MCA 2020-0011. Welcome back.
Yes, Mayor and Council, you have before you, this is the subdivision regulations in regards to, this was an update that, again, was requested by the council when we adopted the changes in 2020. And we're bringing this back before you at this time. These subdivision regulations updates, which you have in your packet with the highlighted sections of where the highlights have amended those changes. The major change has been the discussion item that we've discussed over the past year, which was the update to the park fees, which established a separate fee for multifamily and single-family developments, parkland fee and credit opportunities for approved amenities, establishes park development portions of the total park fee, and includes that in all plats within the city limits and within the ETJ. It amended the plat drawing scales to account for larger subdivisions, which our standard is 1 to 100 to 1 to 200, which allows for larger plats. It became quite difficult as you've had some of these plats come and they're 6 to 10 pages, and so that will help address that issue. And also the regulations regarding centralized mailbox locations, which is a part of a federal law as far as the Postal Service. And so with that, you have the complete staff report in your packet. This did go before the Planning and Zoning Commission and was unanimously approved at their January 13th, 2021 meeting. And staff recommends approval as well.
Council, are you okay if we have our public hearing before we do questions? Sure. Okay. Well, the public hearing on item 7B at this time. If there's anybody who'd like to speak specifically on 7B, come forward. 7B. No takers. We'll close the public hearing on item 7B. Any questions for Mr. Kettner or staff, council? Good. Hearing none. 7B is an action item, if that's your pleasure. Motion on the floor by Mr. Robinson for approval is presented. Second by Kevin Cleveland. Any discussion before we call for a vote on 7B? Hearing none, we'll call for a vote at this time. 7B. Indicate yea or nay, please. Passes 5-0. 7C is hold a public hearing and consider adoption of ordinance 2021-05 for a request for a zone change from AG Agriculture to C2 Interstate Commercial with a conditional use permit for auto sales and service at the lot located on westbound Interstate 20 frontage road and east of Centerpoint Road, being a 5.629 acre tract of land as identified on the Addison Hawkins survey, abstract number 665, and the PB Pipkin survey, abstract number 1073, City of Weatherford, Parker County, Texas, ZCH 2020-0016 and CUP 2020-0013. Welcome back, sir.
Yes. Mayor and Council, this request comes before you after going to the Planning and Zoning Commission at their January 13th, 2021 meeting. And at that this meeting, you have the full staff report and reflect on the comments that were made by the Planning and Zoning Commission during discussion. At that meeting, the Planning and Zoning Commission recommended removal of one condition proposed by staff and voted 7-0 to approve with the following conditions. 1, no structures to include carports or coverings are authorized in the front of the primary structure. 2, a separate permit from the City of Weatherford is required for signs on the parking lot. And 3, parking lot is subject to all Weatherford parking and landscape requirements. And item 4 is all conditions must be met within 180 days of issuance of the required building and or right-of-way permits. And so that's what was recommended for approval, 7-0 by the Planning and Zoning Commission. And if you have any questions, I'd be glad to answer them.
Great, Council. We do have a speaker card on this. Are you okay if we do our public hearing again first? Okay, we'll have a public hearing on item 7C. Mr. Baird will be right with you. But first, is there anybody just from the floor that has not completed a card that wants to speak on 7C specifically? Hearing none, Mr. Bill Baird. Mr. Baird, come on up, sir. Welcome.
Thank you.
Thanks for being patient with us. Once you get settled, you're welcome to remove your mask, and if we can have your name and address, and you'll have 3 minutes, sir.
Bill Baird, Barrett Hampton and Brown Engineers, 6300 Ridgeland Place, Fort Worth, representing Jerry Durant, who is the developer of the project, and Schottenkirk Toyota, who's requesting a conditional use permit to operate a Toyota franchise dealership. It'll be relocating from the existing Schottenkirk site in Hudson Oaks to this property fronting on I-20 for the sale of new and used vehicles.
Okay. Thank you for being here. Are there any questions for Mr. Baird? Appreciate you being here this evening, sir. Thank you. We don't have any other speaker cards at this time. I will close the public hearing on item 7C. Council, questions, discussion?
Start with her.
Mr. Robinson?
Mr. Kentner, the P&Z, as I understand, voted 7-0 to go along with all except first recommendation that said that display of new auto sales only is permitted. Is that correct?
Yes,
City of Weatherford's portion. Okay.
yes.
That's the clarification, because when listening to that, there was a concern of 30, 40 years down the road, and I listened to that, and certainly understand, because it's not just car dealerships. There's a lot of other businesses that are great when they're built, and 30 years later, they don't look so nice, and we fear what they could turn into. For those in the crowd that don't know, my entire career, I've worked in the new car dealership. And when I saw this, as a matter of fact, in a meeting with the city managers, I said, that number one will never fly. And the reason is, everybody knows what kind of cars a new car dealer sells, what kind of new cars they sell. They don't know what they have that's used. And so for them to have an opportunity to market them, they need to be out front where they can be seen and sold. So I guess the question is there anything that we could do? I asked this question, I think, in a previous meeting, with the special, the conditional use permit, that would allow the dealer that's going in and making the investment to operate just like the other two new car dealers on I-20 do, without any rules or provisions as to where they put new and used cars, but that down the road that could protect this from becoming just a standalone used car lot that might be less desirable.
There's a couple theories behind that, but most of what we've seen in the courts have found that conditional use permits run with the land.
Okay.
And so that was one of our concerns, because this lies, mainly it's just the parking lot that is inside city limits. And the only reason staff come up with that requirement was based off of our discussions regarding corridors and concerns that, later on, if it was sold to something else, that was our concern. We didn't know how that would work. And so, but we completely understand the necessity of that for an auto dealership. The Planning Commission did discuss possibilities of maybe limiting it, that area that's within the city limits for maybe by percentage was one of the discussion items on there. But that becomes also is hard to enforce inside. And so
the recommendation that I heard, that if we wanted to make some sort of move towards it that made sense, that one of the P&Z members recommended was just stating that the facility has to sell new and used. And don't put any percentages. It doesn't. Yes. It doesn't mean that what has to be displayed. I mean, if there's one new car, then they hit it. And I would think that most car dealers would have no issue with that, and that might offer some form of a protection.
Right.
So,
Mr. Robinson, can I ask you a question?
Yes.
That would pretty much mean if they're selling new cars, they have a brand flag, correct?
correct.
Okay.
And the protection there is that, at least today, new car manufacturers, they have facility standards that are ever evolving. I mean, if you notice, a lot of your different car brands, every few years, they all build new buildings, or they refresh the fronts of them, and then they have programs that financial incentives to dealers if they hit facility requirements. And I mean, it's everything from the exterior of the building to cleanliness to landscaping to, interior furnishings, and to make sure it stays a nice place. And that is the protection that we could get from saying new and used. Now, that being said, there may be a new brand come in from some Asian country that doesn't have those standards. Who knows what the future holds?
Sure.
But that would be the only the only thing that I see is an issue to me, because other than that, I very much support allowing this to go forward, so.
I would agree with your expertise on that if that's a condition, that it's new and used, then I think that would help address that situation and meet the needs of the applicant without having any percentages else for the future.
Do we know if the applicant would have any issue with that type of?
Mr. Baird, would you mind coming forward, sir? Or the proper person? We try to operate as a team, and you're a customer
sir.
that wants to do business in our area, so how would you're the person that you represent, how would they feel about this?
Well, P&Z said, what's this gonna be in 40 years, not 30 years?
Okay.
And my response to that was, I don't know.
My question to you is the new and used blend, if that was presented, would that be, you use the word deal killer in planning and zoning. If we use the words new and used,
I think it might be.
might be what?
It might be a deal killer. This is a franchise Toyota dealership. Schottenkirk is a nationwide auto dealer and very successful, and the intent is that this is going to be a Toyota store.
And so is there a Toyota store in the world that sells used cars only?
No, sir.
So why would new and used not be acceptable?
The discussion I just had was, well, what happens in the future if we decide to sell this to CarMax? That would prevent us selling this to CarMax.
Understandable, okay.
Yep.
That's, your view is futuristic too, as we were, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, great, thank you.
But we want to build a Schottenkirk Toyota,
Okay.
and that's why we're here, for your CUP.
Great. Mr. Robinson, follow up?
I had that very exact thought going through my head. There are some very nice and good reputable used car dealers, and CarMax is a good example.
Okay.
The protection that I think some of our P&Z was looking for, that I just wanted to cover, is there anything we can do to make sure that this isn't a less desirable facility in our corridor? That being said, Toyota dealers normally are there for the long haul. The biggest concern is that in 20, 30, 40, 50 years, who knows, that they're ready for a bigger, fancier place, and they move down the road, and then who moves in? But we certainly, my opinion is that we don't hold up a good operator like this over that concern, that we, we'll have people in place to battle it when that point comes.
It would be important to note, though, if you did do it as new and used with this, the next user could come back and have their conditional use permit as strictly just as a used car dealership. So.
Other comments, questions? Mayor Pro Tem?
Yes, and I nothing to your expertise, but when I came to Weatherford, it was Weatherford of Toyota. And then it became Durant Toyota. And I would have bet my last penny that it would still be Durant Toyota. And I was wrong. And I've only been here 30 some odd years. I don't want to tell you how many that dates me, but I was adamant that it was going to be Durant Toyota till my last dying day. And it's not. So Schottenkirk may be a great Toyota dealership, but 40 years from now, 50 years from now, they may want to do something different and not be right there in where they were. It is our corridor, and I will say from the pain that we have taken to clean the corridor on Fort Worth Highway and the number of years that it has taken for us to get going on this, to not put new and used, or to not specify some mix like 50-50, I think we're shooting ourselves in the foot in the long run. Yeah. It's hard to come back and clean up what you didn't have foresight to do in the future.
Well said. Other comments?
Yeah, let me make one more. And Heidi, I agree, and I've thought along the same sense, but you know, we can go around town and look at old grocery stores that moved on, and they've got some sort of a flea market going on, or import furniture store, and That's the risk we run with any business, but we know that this one going in is gonna be built to excellent standards and is an operator that has been around a while. I thought possibly that saying new and used, and the other thing is that like he said, a used car operator could come in for a conditional use permit.
Yeah.
And if it's the kind of used car operator that we don't mind, it could be granted, and if it's not, then we don't, possibly.
So what's the deal with the conditional use permit going with the land? If somebody else would, my thing is, you know, in bad times or lean times, used cars are a car dealership's bread and butter. That, just because you put new and used doesn't mean you have to enforce it in the worst of times. But if some other operator comes along that is not up to par, up to what we want to see our corridor look like, then we have some mechanism that goes with this land that says, it said new and used, so you can't bring Bobby Jones in here. I hope there's no one named Bobby Jones. You can't bring Bobby Jones and used cars in here and operate that way. You know, there's some mechanism for enforcement of the continuous use permit that goes with the land.
Did we put any stipulations on the Honda dealership that was built on I-20?
The ordinances were changed since then, the zoning regulations were updated since then. I really think the compromise of new and used, because it doesn't percentage on it or a number, and then it allows someone to come back later on and want to go strictly to a straight used car would be I think that's a good compromise that can meet both needs there, because we're not telling them a specific number, and it would require them later on, if they were to do that, to come back for another conditional use.
I have a clarity question for you, and something that we should think about that hadn't been brought up. First off, I do support the idea of a mix. I don't support the idea of putting together a percentage that dictates how they're gonna function, but it allows them to move their inventory as they need. But the part we're missing also is that this property, if I'm not mistaken, is split between two entities. So the large lion's share of the property is actually located in a neighboring city's ETJ that we do not dictate. The part that we're talking about is a small parcel along the freeway, which will be a parking lot. And if I'm not, I mean, just as a development-minded person in background, even if 30 years from now that car lot goes by the way of CarMax with the piece that's located outside of our jurisdiction, if we have a restriction on that other property, that's prime frontage property that can read it. It's a parking lot. It's prime frontage. If you can't sell a prime piece of property on the interstate feeder road, you got a problem with your property. I just think that it gives you an opportunity to still sell it even with that restriction on it as a and so just wanted y'all to think about the fact that it is not the entire makeup of that property, and that it is divided between.
So you're saying the new and used,
I'm saying new and used mix, no numbers attached to it.
Well,
And just keep in mind that this is a piece of, it is not the entire site, so.
My understanding, Mr. Kettner, is the entity to our east, they have passed this.
Yes, they're working on this simultaneously as we're doing our part, they're doing their part.
Okay. Is this gone through their process and passed as presented, or are you aware? Do you know?
I'm not aware, I know that it has gone.
Okay.
Yep, so it's coming up, so.
Okay.
And again, we're just talking about what's inside the city limits, as we stated.
Mr. Barrett, I normally don't do this, but very briefly, come on back up.
I just want to say a couple of things. First of all, this is a $25 million project, so this is not going to ever be a tote-the-note type used car lot. Schottenkirk has no plans to ever sell this, but again, I can't see 30, 40 years down the road what will happen. But if they do, it's still going to be a major player that would occupy this particular piece of property. And regarding the percentages, and I know this is probably a moot point at this point, but Jerry Durant told me that whenever General Motors went on strike last year and was on strike for 3 years, they went into the strike with a good inventory of new vehicles. He said, but we continued selling those new vehicles. And then the sale of used cars is what got us through the entire General Motors strike. And then even when the strike was over, we couldn't get vehicles. So without the used cars, we would have gone out of business. And I think that could happen to any new car dealer if their workers went on strike. So they have to be able to be flexible. They're in this business to sell cars. Their primary purpose is new cars, but used cars are very important to their business.
Well said, thank you.
Well,
And I think in times of trouble, that's not going to be an issue.
well, and what I was gonna say is that this would certainly, if it said new and used cars, this would never preclude a new car dealer. Because even during those times, you know, I work with at a GM dealer. We all were still new car dealers, and we were never with zero vehicles. I mean, the inventory was much less than we would like for it to have been. It still is, actually, but,
You know, another thing for Mr. Tiskus, I'm sorry. You've
No,
been
no,
very
no.
patient over here, and I'm
No,
jumping.
I just tend to agree with Mr. Baird. I mean, I think we want to be a business-friendly community. Schottenkirk is a good, legitimate brand. We've seen what they've been doing since they bought the Durant Toyota dealership. And I just want us to be careful about, you know, I know we have to protect the corridor and 30 and 40 years down the road. I just want us to be careful about, you know, what we're telling a private business they can and can't do. I think they've proven themselves to be a quality brand, and I think that should take the majority of our consideration as opposed to what could happen 30 or 40 years down the road. I think we should approve it and let them decide what they think is best, because I think they've shown themselves to be able to provide a quality product.
I think there's one that's pretty close to what I was gonna say, but we have to trust the free market. And that's what commerce is about, and the things that we surround that with and work to recruit to our area will help support that and the type of homes and developments that come in.
Absolutely.
And so, you know, I want to be real careful to not, overreaching is not the word, but I want to be real careful to, you know, it's the market's responsibility in a lot of cases to have the impact on what happens long-term to a piece of real estate and development.
And I think
You can't question the capital expenditure amount they're gonna put in there. You can't question the quality and the longevity of the Toyota brand. I think we may be reacting to just a little bit of what we've seen in other corridors, respectfully so. As that y'all have worked for years to clean up other corridors, but I don't want that to bleed over into this as a reactive measure versus just a calculated measure, as a council.
So let me ask you just this, because I got a little confused with what you said.
Most people do.
You're not opposed to saying, or you are opposed to saying, I like the way Jeff said it, new and used, and then you just.
Doesn't bother me a bit. I think we just need to be careful with percentages and
No
other
percentages.
things.
I
With other
agree,
things that.
but I agree with Jeff that language new and used.
if that becomes, though, a deal killer, is that worth killing a deal?
No, it's not.
I don't think it is. And I mean, you know, obviously we don't know what they're going to do, but we should be applauding the fact that they want to do this project. And I think,
I can't imagine how it could become a deal killer.
well, but it's their
I mean,
business too.
if
so.
you had one new car out there because your inventory is low.
Yeah, I don't think that if we left it there, that it would do anything to affect their doing business at all. The only thing that could it possibly stand in the way down the road when they're ready to build another place and sell and be a thorn in their side at that point? And that is, because it couldn't bother them as long as they're a new car dealer. But I also understand completely what Paul and Matt have said, is that they're going to put a huge investment in. And if we do a good job developing around it, that hopefully that's our protection. But I'm going to get on the other side and say, I can show you a lot of new car dealerships that were built to industry standard that are now, but again, I can show you grocery stores, all sorts of other places that are the same way. So, you know, I'm very comfortable with moving forward without that restriction.
Well, would somebody entertain, give us a direction and a lead for something to consider?
I'll make a motion that we accept it as given here, without stipulating the new car versus used car.
Motion on the floor by Councilman Tiskus, as presented. Is there any discussion or is there need for clarification from council on that item? Looking for a second. Second by Jeff Robinson. Any discussion on 7C before we call for a vote? Does anybody need a clarification on the motion? Okay, hearing none, we'll call for a vote at this time on 7C. Please indicate yea or nay. Item passes 3-2. Council, thanks for your healthy conversation on that item. We'll go to item 8 on the agenda, regular agenda items. 8A, consider request for a preliminary plat approval for the Hudson Oaks Business Park, 13 lots on 44.437 acres located at westbound I-20 frontage road east of Center Point in the city of Weatherford and Hudson Oaks, Parker County, Texas, SBD 2020-0061. Mr. Kettner, I think this may be your last time tonight.
Yes,
We're piggybacking on 7C.
it is, and you have the complete staff report in your packet. Because we're the larger of the communities, our regulations, that's why it includes all the lots. But you have the conditions that are listed in the staff report and that were approved by the Planning Commission at their January 13th meeting. That includes items 1 through 9 that are listed in your staff report. And if you have any questions, we'd be glad to answer.
Questions for staff on 8A, council? Okay, entertain a motion on that if it's your pleasure. 8A. Motion for approval by Councilman Tiskus, second by Jeff Robinson. Any discussion on 8A before we call for a vote? Hearing none, we'll take a vote at this time. 8A. Indicate yea or nay, please. 8A passes 5-0. Item 9 on the agenda is staff reports. 9A, fiscal year 20 actuals and fiscal year 21 first quarter financial report. Mr. Kettner, are you sure you don't want to come give this too since you've been up here all night? Okay. Welcome, Ms. Doss.
Thank you, Mayor, members of council. Jessica Doss, Finance Director. So tonight I'll be presenting the financial report for the first quarter of FY21. But before we get into the FY21 report or figures, I'd like to give you a quick update with where we ended FY20 with a budget to actual look. So during the budget process, we projected to reduce our fund balance by about $130,000. In actuality, we closed the fiscal year by increasing our fund balance by $1.75 million. So revenues finished a lot higher than our projections by about $1.4 million due to an increase in sales tax, interest income, plan reviews, inspection services, and some permit fees. Expenditures were under by about $462,000, primarily due to the rollover POs and projects that were not able to. So we did finish the year with about a $1.9 million increase over what we did. So for FY21, the general fund has collected about 25% of its budgeted revenue and spent about 24% of our budgeted expenditures. So during the budget process, we pushed some of our larger one-time expenses to the second and third quarters to allow for a more positive cash flow throughout all of FY21. So this is reflective in these numbers, with the general fund finishing with a slight surplus of about $141,000 through Q1. So as of December, our revenues are falling about in line with how we would have expected. We have collected about 47% of our property tax and only about 17% of our sales tax, which only includes October and November collections. So we have received some larger permits, which is why we're pushing a little bit over 50% in license and permits. And the majority of the revenue classified under other taxes and intragovernmental revenue is based on quarterly billing, which will start coming in January. So as I just mentioned, we have only received 2 months of sales tax revenue. So through November collections, sales tax revenue is up about 5.3% from last year. So on a dollar basis, that equates to about $132,000 from last year and we're up about $80,000 from where we budgeted to be through the first quarter. On the expenditure side, we are tracking on target with about 24% of our annual budget spent. We do still have about $1.2 million in non-recurring items and about $17 million in personnel costs for the moving on to a few of our other funds, our solid waste fund is running a surplus through December with about 27% of our revenue received and 23% of expenditure spent. And last, our hotel motel fund is running a deficit through the first quarter. I would like to note, though, that the revenue only includes 2 months of hotel tax collections, and we have expensed all of our outside funding requests, which out of this fund, it includes the Chamber and the Doss Heritage Foundation, which total about just over $100,000. So in total, we really haven't seen any surprises in our financial picture this year, and everything looks to be on track. So at this time, I'll take any comments or questions that you may have.
Any questions or comments?
Thank you.
Excellent report as always. Thank you. 9B is review of online transportation capital improvement survey. Been real excited about hearing about this. Welcome, Mr. Hughes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of council. Terry Hughes, Director of Capital Transportation. If you'll just give me a moment, I'd like to give you some background on our roadway capital improvement program, which we call our CIP. The CIP was adopted along with our thoroughfare plan, which we call the T plan, in 2013. The CIP defined roadways that the community needs to expand or add to our system over the next 10 to 20 years to address ever-increasing traffic volumes, which we deal with daily. The CIP is normally derived from the T plan. And you may remember that last year, March of 2019, we adopted a major amendment to our thoroughfare plan. Took us about a year to develop that, had a number of public meetings, an input that went on for quite a while. We went on then to select a consultant to work with staff and our Transportation Advisory Board to update our CIP plan to reflect the new amended plan. Since then, we have developed a draft project list based on the amended plan and some known issues that we've isolated. And we're at that point where public input becomes extremely important to us. I will say we will hold a public meeting, our traditional public meeting, but we will have protocols in place for COVID security. But what we do know, or what we're afraid of, is there will be some folks that will be reluctant to attend these meetings because of COVID. So we believe we've found an additional way to safely engage our citizens. To that end, we have an online interactive survey format that allows the public to directly input information and our information from their homes or from their automobiles or wherever, but they don't have to come to these meetings. So that being said, Captain Chad Marbett, our capital projects engineer, is going to present the live format for this program. And he paid me to say Captain.
Captain.
These are the views of my own, not the Air Force, just to be clear. All right, so Terry just mentioned the virtual platform that we've got to get this out to the citizens for participation. We're excited about that. It's easily accessible from all media types and all personal devices that you can possibly think of. City employees had a part in the prototype to make this intuitive and seamless, so we got a lot of feedback. Feedback from other departments was positive enough that you'll probably see this again, targeted for different purposes and different data. So, let's see what my luck is with this link. We tried it earlier. So as you access it, this is what you'll see. A greeting and a general overview of the CIP program, kind of what Terry just described, being the 10 to 20 year program. Go into issue mapping. This is the first of 4 sections you'll get into, and this is the one that's kind of customizable per citizen. So information here to kind of explain how to do it. This map is interactive like other online maps that you've seen before. So we kept the drag and drop issues somewhat general, that way it can be tailored for whatever the citizen sees as an issue. So To get your bearings, you can kind of zoom extents here. See, someone takes Bowie Drive every day, and they say, you know, I want to give some feedback about traffic issues on Bowie. So traffic issues could be safety, congestion, whatnot. They have the option to add what time of day, if it's all day, whatever that may be, and then put in their own input to specifically tell us, hey, what is the problem here? It could be any number of things. So that's one example. Another would be connectivity. So we're familiar with Kirkpatrick Drive behind Academy. Someone said, you know, we need a connection there. Then go in, type in what that reasoning is, what the connection is between. This goes to walkability and bikeability too. Those are have several options in them. Could be anything from sidewalks, crosswalks, trail system, signage, as well as bikeability. So if we go over here and someone thinks that they need a hike and bike trail here.
Yeah.
We've got some standard options here, but if, you know, of course, if it doesn't apply, they've got the opportunity to type in what their suggestion is. So there's no limit to how many of these they can put in, and we'll get all that data back at the end of this. Now, as we step to the next task, it's more tailored to the CIP specific, these draft projects that Terry mentioned. So what we wanted to do is hone down to the top 5 priorities of the citizen whenever they look at this list. So you'll notice it's an aerial, which we thought would be fitting whenever you're looking at the route of these proposed collectors and arterials. Now, we did include the Eastern Loop just for proximity, so you could see how that interacts with our proposed CIP. Sorry, I'll zoom in a little bit. And then purple is along the state and the federal corridors. Those are definitely priorities, so we thought that would be less valuable to find out what was targeted than our local arterials and collectors. So if you zoom in and figure that this is a priority for you, you click on it, you get a cross-sectional concept view of what that would look like, along with an explanation of what the project is. You can select yes, you can also select no, and enter specific information as to why that's a priority maybe. So 5 priorities, you step to the next task, which is our intersections. It's the same setup, just broke out as intersection improvements rather than roadway improvements. So for example, you click here on 180 in Ranger, shows the potential improvements that could be made in a graphical form there, along with the explanation, and of course the comment option again. So the final wrap up after these priorities have been set is we'd like to know what type of transportation user you are. If you do several, that's fine, you can click more than one. Whether you live in the city limits or not, or if you're unsure, which happens frequently. Your name and email address so that we can contact you afterwards in case we have questions about the input you gave us or concerns you have. This is important to find out how they heard about the survey. We're working with Blake and Nicole to get this out on every social media platform, the website. We'll get it into electronic billing, so there's a link there as well. If we get feedback in the next week or two that, hey, most of it's coming from Facebook, then we're going to push Facebook more, try to get more participation. So that's useful to us in the interim. And then any other concerns, that could be concerns with the survey, anything in general. And then I also want to point with this, they can also go back to tabs. If seeing the CIP project kind of brought something in mind, they can go back and add more. So that is the entirety of the online survey. We plan to run this for 60 days. So towards the end of March, we'll close this up, take all the data. We'll be gathering data in the interim and kind of seeing what it's looking like, make sure there's no issues with getting that back. And we're looking forward to substantial targeted information, especially compared to the time constraints of public meetings. We think this is really going to get us a lot back. So I'll try to answer any questions related to this.
Well, you're always able to do a great job at questions. So any questions?
Is this mobile friendly?
Yes, sir.
This is an excellent tool.
Yeah.
And I really appreciate the aggressive nature of y'all in doing everything you can to give people an opportunity to give specific feedback. They're our customers. And this is a great tool, and I hope that you'll circle back around after the survey is complete and maybe share some data. Love to hear the respondent information, where they came from, I think this is a really, really good customer service, customer input tool.
Yes, sir.
Other comments? Great, thank you for your presentation.
Thank you, sir.
You take care of yourself. Let's see, item 10 is future agenda items, council. Mr. Hotop, anything, sir? Okay, I got a no from him. Item 11 is executive session items. 11A, pursuant to Chapter 551 Texas Government Code VTCS Open Meetings Law, in accordance with the authority contained in number 1, 551072, deliberations about real property, deliberate the purchase, exchange, lease, or value of real property, tract of land located in Block 53 of the original town of Weatherford, and 2, 551074, personnel matters to deliberate the appointment, employment evaluation, reassignment, duties, discipline, or dismissal of a public officer or employee, city manager's evaluation. Council, I'd like to hear those. I'd like to hear item 2 first downstairs, and we'll come back to item 1 for any supporting staff members who are going to participate. Council will go into executive session downstairs. We'll adjourn for that at 7:44, and we will reconvene back in this room to hear item 12. Council's back in regular session at 10 p.m. We'll hear item 12, action on executive session items. 12A, to take action if necessary pursuant to Chapter 551 Texas Government Code VTCS Open Meetings Law, in accordance with the authority contained in number 1, 551072, deliberations about real property to deliberate the purchase, exchange, lease, or value of real property, a tract of land located in Block 53 of the original town of Weatherford. City Council, would you like to consider action on item 1 under 12A?
No, sir.
No action on this item. We'll move to item 2 under 12A, which is 551074, personnel matters to deliberate the appointment, employment, evaluation, reassignment, duties, discipline, or dismissal of a public officer, employee, city manager evaluation. Council, do you have any desire to take action on this item?
Mayor, I move that we approve the renewal of the city manager's contract as modified.
Motion on the floor by the Mayor Pro Tem as stated, a second by Kevin Cleveland. Any discussion on item 2 under number 12 before we call for a vote? Hearing none, we'll call for a vote on that item at this time. Please indicate yea or nay. That passes unanimously. Item 13 on the agenda is citizen comments on non-agenda items. Is there anybody on the floor that has an item? Hearing none, item 14 on the agenda is adjournment. Motion on the floor by Jeff Robinson, second by Mayor Pro Tem Wilder. For adjournment and no discussion, we'll call for a vote at the city secretary's pleasure here. Indicate yea or nay, please. We're adjourned at 10:02 p.m., 5-0. City Council, thank you for your service.